to Full Press Fantasy Sunday live here on Sunday, November 21st. My name is Kyle Senner, and this is week 11 of the NFL season. So, here today to talk about some sit starts, active and inactive lists, and answer any questions that you have as listeners and viewers. So, we'll get into that very shortly. I'll start off with some of the sit start decisions that I'm making in particular, and like, again, as I've said every week, not just the decisions, but why I'm making these decisions. What's factoring in? It's sort of the, less of getting the fish, more teaching a fish type thing. Well, why? What am I looking at? What am I doing to decide? Hopefully I can best help everyone who is players. So I'm going to talk about some specific players, but the things I'm talking about apply to more than just those players. So, so we'll get into that. Of course, at any point, ask questions, and I'll do my best to get to them as soon as I can. This should be great. So, I guess the first thing to talk about is one of the tougher decisions I'm having this week is Jalen Waddle, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman. I've got them all kind of ranked pretty similarly, and I'm having a hard time playing Pittman in that matchup with the Bills. So I think that's kind of been tricky for me. So I guess one thing I can do is I'll show that kind of what I'm dealing with and what are the things I'm looking at. So if you'll just give me a second here. All right, so every week I have this spreadsheet here that I use as kind of, help me decide, factor in my decisions. And so this is the one up here I'm talking about first to start. Between having to start two players, one's a flex spot, so I could start two wide receivers if I wanted, but T. Higgins, Michael Pittman, Jalen Waddle, David Montgomery. Now, the particular thing about this league, it's half-point PPR, but also half-point per first down. And that really pushes things towards especially the running back, in this case, David Montgomery. So I kind of went through and looked at production. And so some of the things I look at, again, production, floor ceiling, what that player has done this year. So far, as you can see, Michael Pittman's range of outcomes, he's got the best ceiling performance at 27.6 points, but also has the worst floor performance at 4.9. And Jalen Waddle's right there, 27 points, also pretty close. Really, the one thing that stood out when I looked at this right away was T. Higgins hasn't hit 16 fantasy points in this scoring set. I know he's gotten a lot of big target games, but nothing huge like the other three. So that was already kind of, Higgins might be the guy to bench there. Obviously having to bench two. The defensive rankings do favor Waddle and Montgomery. The DVOA especially shows it, and both are the two best DVOA, but especially Waddle versus the Jets. The offensive line rankings, that is where Pittman is. That is his best category. But even then, the Bengals O-line, 25th in adjusted sack rate, which is basically right there with the Dolphins. But like again, it's another reason to not pick Higgins. Like it's a lot of things working against Higgins actually. The only thing really that does work in Higgins' favor is the team's implied total. The Bengals have 25.75 as a projected total against the Raiders, where even though the Dolphins are playing the Jets, they only have a 24-point total. Bengals more points, but does that mean more towards Higgins? It could just mean more rushing touchdowns too, but that's where he lines up best. And then the yards per team attempt. I get this stat from Peter Howard, and I mean, it's a per game basis stat. So like it's only kind of the games where he played. So David Montgomery smashes the others, but he's a running back. So again, like that's what it matters, but it also is, that's why running back, especially in these types of leagues, like if I can flex that running back, I will. But because 2.23 yards per team attempt. So every attempt that the team makes, whether it's a rush for him or a pass attempt, he gets 2.23 yards off of that average. The other guys that, Pittman's actually pretty high, 1.54, whereas 1.22 for Higgins, only 1.09 for Waddle. Was a little surprising. Red zone targets, Waddle and Higgins are last with 8, but Waddle has played more games, so technically he's last. But the person getting, again, most red zone opportunity is the running back. So everything kind of favoring the running back. So many of these factors, and even look at the goal line guide, which is my invention. For those looking on fullpresscoverage.com, you can find it there. And for this week, the Dolphins do have a pretty good goal line guide, a great grade passing, at 74.5. The next highest was the Bears running, though, at 67. really close to 66.75 by the Bengals and even 62.25 for the Colts. But again, standing out as Waddle being the standout here. So one of the things I looked at is, okay, so the green meaning that the most at one category, red is the least at one category. The difference between those two was positive for both Montgomery and Waddle, actually neutral for Higgins. Because while he was never the favorite, he also wasn't last in very many categories. The only one was his ceiling, but frankly, that's the one that probably matters the most to me. But he was neutral, whereas Pittman ended up as a -4. He was last in a lot of categories. Actually, this is wrong. It's -4. It should actually be -2. My math is bad, apparently. But anyway, but still, as the negative. And then I also looked, this is a number of times that a player was top 2. And Waddle and Montgomery were top, because again, it's a start 2. So of this threshold of 2 players, who matches that threshold in enough of these categories as often. And it was Waddle and Montgomery again. So that's why I'm, again, heavily leaning the running back, knowing the format, half point per first down, as well as the half point PPR. And then between the receivers, it really did kind of come down to Waddle Higgins. And I kind of just prefer Waddle this week. So that's kind of how I made that decision there. One of the leagues where I've got a really tough call is can start 3 of these players. 2 of them have to be wide receivers. So Jamal Agnew, Brian Edwards, Marcus Johnson, KJ Osborne, Malik Turner. So you can see I've gone with Edwards and Turner. It's funny because Edwards didn't lead in any category, also wasn't last in any category, and it just he's been up and down. Everyone's been up and down. Really, the only safe floor is Zach Moss, and even then, like 4.4 points is not that great of a floor. So I kind of actually didn't even factor in floor to this. So a lot of them are 0, especially for the receivers. But yeah, I think looking at the numbers here, it says I should play Zach Moss, but I really don't want to over Nyheim Hines. I just think they're in the same game, so I can really look at this game script and kind of analyze it, right? Buffalo and the Colts. With the Bills, like actually really both defenses are really great, but really great front to the defenses. Rushing is going to be tough, rushing touchdowns, which isn't necessarily Hines' game, so he's not as affected by that. The receptions, that's about more game script, right? Do the Bills get up big and force the Colts to pass, which I think is realistic. So whereas with Moss, it's also really tough defensive front. Again, tough to get those rushing touchdowns. I don't know that the game lines up for Moss to do that well, even though again, the production, the numbers are saying it is. I'm feeling like playing Hines, even though I have Moss indicated. I really am good. I think I have Hines in. Now, I have Lamar Jackson in this league, and I don't actually have a backup quarterback. It's super flex, so I'm already playing Dak. I don't actually have a second. I kind of didn't prepare the greatest. That's on me there. But what it means is that if Jackson's out, and I will check shortly on that, he might already be out, and people are looking at me like that's silly, but if he's out, then I'll just play both running backs. But again, so those are just kind of how I'm factoring in some of these decisions. So what I'm looking at, I'm looking at player production. I'm looking at the defensive rankings, both in terms of just raw fantasy points scored, fantasy points allowed per position, but also the overall DVOA of the defense. DVOA and O-line rankings, I get them both from Football Outsiders. The implied total is just the projected total for that team. So you look at it based on the spread and the over under of the game and the spread. You can use those together to determine what each team's projected total is. The yards per team attempt, which I mentioned, I get that from Peter Howard. The red zone carries and targets, as well as carries inside the 5 in parentheses for, like, it applies to Montgomery and Moss more. I get all that from 4for4. And then the goal line guide, which is my creation, I use it from gathering goal line data from 4for4, but also just looking at game logs. I usually go to ESPN for that. Their game logs are actually really nice and detailed, length of play. So I like using that. And then it's just it's about a offensive efficiency versus defensive efficiency in each matchup each week. And then also factor in the implied total in that to say, okay, how often are points going to be scored for this team anyway? And then it just kind of gives me I create the goal line grade number. And so that's where that all comes from. But this is kind of how I make my start sit decision. So there's really just these 3. I kind of did a lot yesterday to where I don't have too many decisions. Now, a lot of it is, okay, Kyler Murray's questionable. So what do I do if Murray's out? And then like stuff like with Jackson. There's another league where it's a 2 QB league, but it's only 8 teams. So there's enough backup quarterbacks. Like I saw Daniel Jones available, Justin Fields. So I was waiting to see the official announcement to pick up one of those guys. I don't know who I'm going to pick up between those 2, actually. So that's tough there between Daniel Jones and Justin Fields. So, but that's a talk for another time. Because I think now is time to get to the actives and inactives. They should all be out. So I'm just going to look that up real quick. I usually use what site do I use now? It's a RotoWire. Sorry, not Roto. There's so many Rotos. I always get confused. They all rotate in my mind. So RotoWire is usually where I go. I just list all the teams, tells you all the inactive players. So let me just find that real. Okay, I think it's this. Here we go. And no. Sorry, I'm actually not finding the usual link. That's interesting. Here we go. They just called it week 10. Okay, yeah. Week 11. Lamar Jackson is out, as is Marquise Brown, both of those key options. So that one league, I'm going to have to go plug in Zach Moss. Another league, I'm going to have to decide between Daniel Jones and Fields. Maybe towards the end of the episode, I'll kind of talk about what will factor in those decisions. So Lamar Jackson out. That'll be the big news. Yeah, both he and Marquise Brown would have been probably every week starters anyway, regardless of format. That's about it for Ravens in terms of big news. So it looks like Latavius Murray is going to be active. Also, Tyson Williams will be active as well. Then he won't be a healthy scratch this week, so they'll have all three running backs. I feel like Freeman's still the one I'd want to play the most, just because with Murray dealing with the injury. But once Murray's healthy, it feels like he's the guy you want. But I think for this week, it's still Freeman. But it might be tricky to play all of them. This offense may not do that much. Wonder. You know what? I wonder if that actually does make it good for Fields in terms of. Yeah, I think I might play Justin Fields over Daniel Jones there as a replacement for Lamar Jackson. Anyway, that tangent aside, Bills, nothing really major. Tremaine Edmonds is out, so defensively, I mean, as a linebacker, again, it's still a great defensive front, so I don't know if it's going to make it that much better for Jonathan Taylor. You're still playing him anyway. You might still finish the number one running back this week anyway, even if it's in a tough matchup. Kumero's inactive, so it looks like the wide receivers are all healthy. For the Panthers, nothing major. Wide receiver Shi Smith, a rookie, so I feel like he's been a healthy scratch most games. For the Bears, Allen Robinson is out. So wide receiver Allen Robinson out. Akeem Hicks is also out. Khalil Mack, I believe, is on the injured reserve, out for the season. So, quite a few injuries in this Ravens-Bears game, actually. Allen Robinson out. Mooney's a good play, but I guess more for the tight ends more than anything. Maybe it's just more good week for David Montgomery, probably, just in terms of giving him attempts. And without Lamar Jackson, the Bears might be able to get to a game script where they're leading. Maybe that's not as great for Justin Fields now I think about it. I'll get back to that later. Cleveland Browns, inactive wide receivers, Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz. So both are out this week. And against the Lions, I wonder if that's just going to be a crazy run-heavy approach anyway. Like the Browns may not throw it very much at all. Baker's dealing with injuries. Landry he's healthy now, but he dealt with an injury a couple weeks ago. Like the whole team's kind of not that great in terms of fully healthy offensive pieces. So I wonder if just a run-heavy, control the clock approach against the Lions. Speaking of the Lions, Jared Goff is inactive. Wide receiver Trinity Benson's out. Running back Jamar Jefferson, all three inactive. So for the Lions, I think Tim Boyle's starting. And I guess, can't remember the backup running back's name for the Lions. I don't know that he's very playable against the Browns. You'll still play Swift, Hawkinson. I think I'm playing Khalif Raymond in a couple spots. If you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's probably the same thing too. Looking at the Packers now. So Aaron Jones inactive. That's no surprise. They ruled him out pretty early. Alan Lazard hasn't practiced this week. He's also inactive, as is wide receiver Malik Taylor. So for the wide receiver depth chart, it's going to be Devontae Adams, Randall Cobb, and Valdez Scantling as the three starters. And then I'd assume Juwan Winifrey and Equanimeous St. Brown. I mean, they're both active today. I assume they're going to get some playing time as well. So look for those guys. I think I've got a league where we start 13 players. It's super deep. I think I'm starting Juwan Winifrey just as if he gets a touchdown or gets a long throw, again, with Valdez Scantling just kind of working his way back. Who knows how much usage he's actually going to get. Could be a lot of Adams and Cobb. I kind of just want to play both those. I mean, obviously Adams, but I think Randall Cobb, any league I have him in, I'm starting him. I know, I watched an interview with him this week. He's mentioned he's actually individually not done the greatest against the Vikings. The types of defenses they run do tend to kind of favor clogging the middle. So tight ends and slot receivers aren't as effective as the perimeter receivers, which is, I think, part of my reason to play Winfrey that one spot. But I just think Cobb is going to get so many targets that he's going to volume his way to production. So I'm starting him as well. Houston Texans, tight end Jordan Akins out. Running back Royce Freeman, I forgot he was on the team. He's inactive. I mean, okay, Akins out. I guess it means really the one tight end I might want to play there is the rookie Brevin Jordan. He might be outside of Brandon Cooks and the other rookie wide receiver Nico Collins. Those are the only two guys I really want to play. If you're stuck in a tight end premium league, maybe Brevin Jordan, maybe it's more dynasty leagues where he's rostered a ton of spots where you might get a chance to use him this week. But yeah, for the Colts, Marlon Mack's inactive again. They've made him a healthy scratch most games this year, it seems. Taylor and Hines. I'm gonna again. Hines and Moss is an interesting decision I've got at least in one league. I feel like I'm favoring Hines just on the game script. All right, for the Jags, Devine Azigbo, Jacob Hollister inactive. That doesn't really change much. For the Dolphins, Salvin Ahmed is inactive. So, I mean, Myles Gaskin's probably going to get most of the work. I'm trying to think who else they have there. Is Patrick Laird time? No, I mean, I don't think anyone else is worth playing other than Myles Gaskin, but yeah, he should be fine. Amir Smith-Marset for the Vikings. He's been a healthy scratch most games this year. He hasn't played much at all. For the Saints, so Kamara's out. Ty Montgomery's out. Ryan Ramchek's out, actually, the starting offensive tackle. So maybe Mark Ingham's still going to get a lot of work, but maybe hesitant on the passing game more than anything. Juwan Johnson at tight end's out. So maybe Adam Troutman's playable. Again, it's kind of like Brevin Jordan. It had to be a tight end premium league. Again, young receiver, so it's probably more dynasty oriented, if anything, for those guys. For the Jets, LaMichael Pine's inactive. I don't know if that's injury. I think that's mostly been healthy scratch. He's been very, since Tevin Coleman's return, he's not been playing. So I think very clearly the fourth guy there. And I mean, even Tevin Coleman's very clearly the third guy behind Carter and Ty Johnson. So even if Pine's active, doesn't seem like he's getting much. For the Eagles, so this is interesting. With Miles Sanders returning, how is this going to shake out? Kenneth Gainwell's actually inactive. So with Sanders coming up, it seems like Gainwell's the one that they put out of the lineup. So it's going to be, I guess, Miles Sanders, Jordan Howard, with Boston Scott as kind of the third guy. Interesting how that's going to break down. For the 49ers, two running backs inactive, Elijah Mitchell and JaMychal Hasty. So probably expect a lot of Jeff Wilson today. And I mean, Trey Sermon's probably going to play. But again, I think they're probably just going to trust Jeff Wilson with the rock most of the time, to be honest. He's been, he's not, he's coming off an injury, but he's barely gotten any touches this year. So in that sense, they probably want to get him into the game. I mean, really, he's probably their best option. They kind of need to win every game they can right now to kind of keep their playoff hopes alive. So, yeah, I think Jeff Wilson, heavy dosage of that. So even with Elijah Mitchell inactive, I still wouldn't start Trey Sermon. I just think Jeff Wilson's going to get probably all the goal line touches and all the pass catching stuff. You might see Trey Sermon get some carries inside the 20s. If he gets 40 yards, 4 points in your lineup, probably not doing much, right? It's maybe he gets the touchdown, but I think that's all going to go to Jeff Wilson. Tennessee Titans, Jeremy McNichols, Jeff Swain out. I think I'm playing Michael Pruitt in a couple spots. Just with the tight ends, it'll be him and Ferkser. So who's going to get the touchdowns? Seems like it's been kind of split ways where Jeff Swain was really the kind of the tight end to have there, and now without him, it could go either direction. I kind of feel like it might go Pruitt. Ferkser hasn't done much at all this year. Pruitt's throughout the season, even with Jeff Swain there, has kind of been used as this red zone guy, a couple touchdowns here and there, nothing major. It won't be like a huge ceiling game. It might be 30 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is great. I mean, that's double-digit points if you can get the multiple touchdowns. That's the really key, though. But, so Michael Pruitt, playable for sure, I think. Ricky Seals-Jones, speaking of tight ends, inactive. I don't know. I don't think Logan Thomas has been active off IR, so that's one where I'm is Jeremy Sprinkle still there? I don't know that I want to play any of the tight ends. Really, what it might come down to, okay, Terry McLaurin for sure, you're starting him. Might be more towards the receivers like Diami Brown, and maybe just more towards running back like J.D. McKissick. Maybe they use him more as a receiver. I like Antonio Gibson this week. I feel like I was ahead of consensus. I had him in my top 12 this week, whereas consensus was closer to 20. I talked about this with my co-host Brad on the Full Press Fantasy Pod. We debated that, but I think he should do fine against the Panthers. Did fine against the Bucks, right? So if you can do that good against that defense, should be fine for everyone. So 12 noon now. I did start a little late, so I'll go on for an extra 10 minutes just to give you the full half hour here. But yeah. So I guess just to recap everything, the biggest inactives are for sure Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, both of those Ravens players, Allen Robinson as well. Really, three players in that game. A couple of Browns receivers, Donovan Peoples-Jones especially is one people were wanting to play. Jared Goff's inactive as well. Alan Lazard out, Aaron Jones out. Jones news I think everyone knew, but certainly Lazard, that's news to this morning. So again, more playable for Valdez-Scantling. If you're desperate enough in a 13 team, a start 13 league, Juwan Winifrey as well, apparently. Salvin Ahmed, inactive for the Dolphins, the running back. So I'm actually going to look a couple of these depth charts up real quick. I don't know that, again, you play Miles, I don't know you're going to play his backups for this game. Sorry. I'm trying to think. It might actually be Patrick Laird. I was not really half joking, but yeah, I think he might actually be back up there. Let me take a look at the step chart. Patrick Laird. Oh, Duke, that's right. They have Duke Johnson. That's right. And yes, I did hear that they activated him off the practice squad. So actually, Duke might actually get some play over Patrick Laird, but I don't know that I'd want to start. I think it's still Myles Gaskin, maybe more the pass catchers. Jalen Waddle. There really aren't that many great players on this team. Albert Wilson, it might be startable. Yeah. Must mean a lot more volume for Gaskin and Waddle. So good news in that sense, I suppose. But yeah, Salvin Ahmed inactive. Alvin Kamara is inactive. Kenneth Gainwell is out. Elijah Mitchell inactive. So quite a few running backs here. Jeremy McNichols, again, another running back, couple tight ends, and Jeff Swain and Ricky Seals-Jones might have been in lineups. They're both inactive. Actually, that's another one I wanted to look up. Who is the starting tight end for Washington then? Let me take a look at this quick. It'll be John Bates, Tamara Hemingway, and Samus Reyes. Yeah, so I think actually someone who's been coming on of late, I forgot to mention DeAndre Carter. I wonder if he actually comes in and maybe starts, it's kind of big play threat, be tough against the Panthers. Maybe you do prefer the slot receiver and Adam Humphries there. But yeah, I think Carter, McLaurin, Gibson, McKissick, right? That four core is a lot of the players you're going to play from Washington, I would think. So yeah, of course, feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I'm just going to chime through on a couple things here and there. So other decisions to make. Where do I go from here? Well, talking about Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, that was one where that might be interesting. So I'm just going to look at a couple of things right here. I'm going to start with the goal line guide, I guess. Although I'm going to look at both goal line grades for Justin Fields in particular because I think the rushing grades do apply to him as well. So looking at my goal line guide for that Bears Ravens game, yeah, I was really excited to play Jackson this week. The passing grade was 81.25 for the Ravens. 72.5 rushing actually does, which is funny. That's the same grade as the Bears passing. So with like that, you're not going to be as effective. So it's interesting to see. But yeah, so a 72.5 passing goal line grade for the Bears, 67 rushing. Now, if I look at the Giants are. I will find them. Don't worry. They are here. I know they're here. If they're playing, they're here. Who are they playing this week? Tampa, right? Yeah, this would be a high up here. Oh yeah, here it is. I was looking down low because like, oh, the Giants can't score much, but actually, I have it ranked off over under total for the game. So it's 63 for the passing goal line grade. Kind of makes me want to lean Fields, honestly. Like having the rushing and passing grades for the Bears be higher than either of the Giants, really. Now, what's leading to those grades? So I'll look through. So specifically looking at the offense's passing, that's what we're going to compare. So I think the Giants have more touchdowns from inside the 5 thrown than the Bears do. It's 4-2 actually for the Giants, but how I calculate my grades is actually through percentage, and it's only 33% of their plays the Giants have scored on, where it's 67% for the Bears. That means they've only thrown 3 passes from inside the 5, right? So it's also kind of leaning on that. But 6 rushing touchdowns percent of their scores, right? So that's more significant than say what the Giants passing grade is, right? And it's interesting because looking at so it's close. And I look at like the Bucks, for instance, they've allowed passing touchdowns on 54% of their thrown plays, whereas the Ravens actually only 38%. So really, like the goal line grades are pretty close, and I think maybe it kind of almost neutralizes it. And then I look again towards Justin Fields rushing, right? Like having that edge. The Ravens have allowed they're more, they've allowed 3 rushing touchdowns inside their 5, 3 passing touchdowns inside their 5, 6 rushing touchdowns. So twice as much rushing efficiency in terms of defensive inefficiency, more I should say, for the Ravens. So the Ravens have allowed more rushing touchdowns inside their 5 than they have passing touchdowns, doubling in fact. The percentages are close though, 40%. So teams have tried to run on the Ravens a lot, but only scored 40% as opposed to 38%. So it's pretty equal. But it's about the Bears, right? Like their own efficiency in both, really. And the Giants' lack of efficiency scoring touchdowns. So like in terms of high upside ceiling play, I feel like Fields is actually the better play than Daniel Jones. Implied totals are actually equal, 19.5 for both. So neither offense expected to score very much. I guess so other decisions I'll factor in, other lineup decisions I'll kind of go through and look at the production from those players. So let me just pull that up real quick. So this one I will real quick. And then I know for I'll take a look. I know for the O-line, it's the Bears have like one of the worst. So the O-line that does favor Daniel Jones, although it's not that much better. Implied totals are the same. Again, the goal line grade slightly favoring the Bears. So really, probably going to come down to like the defensive matchups as well as, just the total player. Okay, so let me take a look here. Sorry, a little slow to load. Okay, so actually I've got to go find those players now. Because I noticed they're both available. Those two kind of struck my eyes. Okay, those are the ones I kind of want to play. I'll take a look at who else is there. Might as well. Jimmy Garoppolo. Actually, there aren't that many available. Tyrod Taylor, a decent matchup actually, but yeah, there aren't that many available. I'm actually a little surprised. Bucks have allowed the 10th. So in terms of fantasy points allowed, the Bucks are the better matchup. Daniel Jones, he's only scored 18 points since returning from injury. Did have that 31-point game against Washington early, but again, it's kind of favors towards that passing game. So, now who to drop. That one's tricky. Who to drop in this league? Maybe just Cordarrelle Patterson. He already played, and it's Yahoo. You can drop players already played, and just hope I get him back just to get the quarterback. So yeah, we'll throw in Daniel Jones there. I think the matchup sets up well. Hoping he can reach that former ceiling. I think I do have him ranked higher than Jackson in my rankings anyway. The goal line guys were close, but I think I'll go with the matchup in Daniel Jones. Because the thing is with this Ravens Bears game, it might end up being like snail pace, not very many points. Like that is the one thing that worries me. Whereas, if the Bucs score a lot of points, the Giants probably have to score in consequence. We just saw Washington put up points against them. So that's how I'll go. Just looking at the matchup and former player production, I think kind of leads me towards David Montgomery. So yeah, that's that. I guess it is 10 after 12, gone on for half an hour now. So not seeing any questions. I hope I did as good a job as I could to help with this, to clarify these lineup decisions. Once again, I'm on Twitter at Senra Says. You can also follow the Full Press Fantasy Pod at FPC_Fantasy Pod. Really appreciate that. Every week we talk rankings debates. I know next week will be a little bit different, I think, in terms of the output. We might actually do 2 episodes next week for the Thanksgiving Thursday and then a normal rankings debate. But yeah, I think, the big news today, Lamar Jackson inactive, a few other players as well. Elijah Mitchell was one of the big ones. But just kind of go back and make sure you don't have Lamar Jackson in any lineups. And I know in Superflex leagues, that's tricky. Single quarterback, there should be some good options out there. But yeah, I hope, again, going through my lineup decisions, start sit. I hope that helped any of you with your own start sit decisions. So thank you very much. And again, Kyle Senra here, signing out for FPC Fantasy Sunday. This was week 11. Goodbye and see